Okay, so today we're going to be doing a deep dive into apple cider vinegar.
Oh, fun.
It's kind of like it's everywhere these days, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like it's this kitchen staple, but it's suddenly like blown up in the wellness world.
Right.
But like with everything in the wellness world, there's a lot of like conflicting information and like pretty out there claims.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I was kind of hoping we could like unpack that a little bit today.
Absolutely.
And like look at the benefits, but also maybe like some of the risks
Sure.
and yeah, just kind of see what the real science has to say about this.
Definitely. I think it's really interesting how apple cider vinegar has managed to be both this like traditional folk remedy,
Mm-hmm.
but also this like modern health trend.
Right.
And that's like, I think makes it ripe for both like genuine interest,
Mm-hmm.
but also misleading claims.
Yeah, and like, you always see that like miracle cure narrative.
Oh, for sure.
And I think a really good example of that is like Belle Gibson.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember her? She built like this whole empire on the idea that she like cured her terminal brain cancer
Right.
with natural therapies, including apple cider vinegar.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it turned out that that was completely fabricated.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show you how easily people who are seeking hope, and especially people who are facing serious health challenges, can be misled by these really persuasive narratives.
Yeah. And it's scary because, they're looking for anything. And when somebody comes along and says, hey, I have this miracle cure that, helped me,
Right.
it's easy to see how people would fall for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially without that solid evidence to back it up.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get too deep into that, though, I think it's worth just like clarifying what exactly we're talking about when we say apple cider vinegar. Like,
Yeah.
what is, I know it comes from apples,
Yeah.
but is it just like applesauce in a bottle, or is there something else going on there?
It's definitely more than just applesauce in a fancy bottle.
Oh.
It starts with apple juice, and then it goes through this fermentation process.
Okay.
So it's using microorganisms to like basically transform the sugars in the juice.
Mm-hmm.
And a key byproduct of that fermentation is acetic acid.
Okay.
And that's what gives it that like tangy flavor that you think of with apple cider vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people think that's what's responsible for a lot of the like potential health benefits.
Okay, so that's where the vinegar part comes in.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And I know fermentation is like a big buzzword these days because of things like kombucha and kimchi.
Mm-hmm.
And they're often like touted for their probiotic benefits.
Yeah.
So does apple cider vinegar have probiotics too?
It does, but there's a distinction between live and active cultures,
Okay.
like what you'd find in yogurt
Right.
versus postbiotic compounds that are present in ACV.
Okay.
So postbiotics are like the byproducts of those beneficial bacteria.
Okay.
But some research suggests that they might actually have their own like positive effects.
Interesting. So it's not just about the bacteria themselves. It's also about like the stuff that they leave behind.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've got the acetic acid. We've got the postbiotics. What else is in this like concoction?
So it also has a variety of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants.
Okay.
But the amounts are usually pretty small.
Yeah.
So it's not something you'd really rely on
Hmm.
as your primary source of those nutrients.
Sure.
But the real interest is really in the potential effects of that acetic acid.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen all kinds of claims about apple cider vinegar helping with everything from weight loss to blood sugar control.
Yeah.
Like, what does the science actually say about these potential benefits?
There's definitely some interesting research emerging,
Okay.
but I think it's really important to like approach it all with a balanced perspective.
Hmm.
So for example, some studies have looked at apple cider vinegar's effect on blood sugar levels. And there was a study published in the Journal of Functional Foods, and they found that consuming apple cider vinegar with a meal actually led to improved insulin sensitivity in adults who had prediabetes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this suggests that it could play a role in regulating blood sugar,
Okay.
which would be really relevant for people who are at risk for type 2 diabetes.
It's not a cure, but potentially helpful in
Yeah,
managing it.
alongside other interventions.
Right. What about weight loss? Does apple cider vinegar really help people lose weight?
It's not a magic weight loss potion, that's for sure.
Okay, good, because I was a little skeptical about that.
Yeah. But some small studies have shown that consuming it might increase feelings of fullness,
Oh, interesting.
which could then lead to a reduction in calorie intake.
Okay.
There's one study in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and they found that participants who had apple cider vinegar with a high-carb meal
Mm-hmm.
reported feeling more satiated than those who didn't.
Okay, so maybe it can help like curb those cravings and prevent overeating.
Yeah, potentially.
But I imagine the effect is probably pretty modest
Yeah, you're right.
and not something that should be relied on as like the only
The food,
strategy.
like healthy diet, regular exercise are still the cornerstones.
Right.
Apple cider vinegar could be like a helpful addition,
Yeah.
but definitely not a substitute.
This is all super helpful. It's great to have like some concrete evidence to
Hmm.
like sift through all the hype. But I'm also wondering about like potential risks. I mean, IS vinegar, which is acidic.
Mm.
So is there anything people should be cautious about?
You're right. Anything taken in excess can have downsides.
Mm-hmm.
Even something like apple cider vinegar that's generally considered pretty safe.
Right.
Moderation is key, and the acidity is the main concern.
Okay.
Because if you consume large amounts of it, especially if it's undiluted,
Mm-hmm.
it can erode your tooth enamel over time.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so it can make your teeth more sensitive and more prone to cavities.
So dilute it before drinking.
Yes, definitely.
What else should people watch out for?
Some people experience digestive discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
like heartburn or indigestion,
Okay.
especially people who have sensitive stomachs.
Yeah.
Because it can lower your blood sugar levels, there's a theoretical risk that it could interact with certain medications,
Mm-hmm.
particularly medications for diabetes.
So if you are on any medication, talk to your doctor before adding this to your
Yeah.
routine.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that while some people swear by apple cider vinegar for a variety of ailments,
Yeah.
the evidence for a lot of these claims is often anecdotal.
Mm-hmm.
So, you'll find testimonials about it curing acne or boosting energy levels,
Right.
even fighting cancer. But you have to remember, those personal experiences don't necessarily translate to scientific proof.
Totally. Correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because somebody drinks apple cider vinegar and then their skin clears up doesn't mean that it was the vinegar that did it.
Exactly.
It could be a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And, putting all your hopes on something like apple cider vinegar for something as serious as cancer
Yeah, right.
could be really risky,
Absolutely.
especially if it means delaying or preventing
Yeah.
proper medical treatment.
For sure. So you really have to be discerning about the information that you come across
Yeah.
and not fall for those like too good to be true claims.
Right.
It's important to stick to evidence-based sources
Mm-hmm.
and consult with qualified healthcare professionals.
Yes, absolutely. So speaking of evidence, are there any other like areas of research that are particularly like promising or intriguing
Yeah.
when it comes to apple cider vinegar?
There's some preliminary research that's been looking into its potential antimicrobial properties.
Oh, interesting.
So one study found that it was actually effective against several types of bacteria,
Okay.
including E. coli and Staphylococcus aureus.
Wow.
So while this is like far from conclusive, it suggests that it might have some topical applications for things like minor cuts or skin infections.
Okay, so not replacing antibiotics, but potentially helpful.
Yeah, as an adjunct.
Yeah, I'm curious, what are some of like the biggest misconceptions that you encounter when you're talking about apple cider vinegar?
One of the most common ones is that it's a detox agent.
Oh, yeah.
People talk about it cleansing the body or flushing out toxins,
Right.
but in reality, our bodies have their own really efficient detoxification systems.
Yeah.
The liver and the kidneys do a great job of filtering out waste products.
Exactly. Like, we don't need this special vinegar to do it for us.
Exactly.
Another misconception is that all apple cider vinegar is created equal.
Yeah, you'll find a huge variety of options on the market,
Mm-hmm.
like from clear filtered vinegars to the cloudy unfiltered kind that has the mother.
Oh, yeah, I've seen the cloudy bottles. What is the mother?
So the mother is basically a collection of beneficial bacteria and yeast
Okay.
that forms during the fermentation process.
Mm-hmm.
It gives the vinegar that cloudy appearance.
Right.
And it also contains those postbiotic compounds that we talked about earlier.
So it's kind of like the kombucha SCOBY,
Yeah, exactly.
that like blob of bacteria and yeast
Yeah.
that forms during fermentation.
Oh.
Gotcha. So is the mother something that we want in our apple cider vinegar?
So there's no like definitive evidence that the mother gives you extra benefits
Okay.
than the filtered
Yeah.
kind.
Okay.
But some people prefer it for that potential probiotic content
Mm-hmm.
and the more natural unprocessed state.
Sure. So like if you're looking for a more natural option, go for the cloudy stuff.
Exactly.
Cool. Any other tips for choosing like a good quality apple cider vinegar?
Yeah, look for raw and unfiltered on the label,
Okay.
because that means that the vinegar hasn't been pasteurized or heat treated,
Mm-hmm.
which can actually destroy some of the beneficial enzymes and bacteria.
Okay.
And also choose a vinegar that's stored in a glass bottle
Mm-hmm.
rather than plastic, because some plastics can leach chemicals into the vinegar over time.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've chosen our high-quality apple cider vinegar.
Hmm.
We've brought it home. What's the best way to actually use it?
Yeah.
I know some people take shots of it, but that doesn't sound very appealing to me.
I wouldn't recommend taking shots of it straight,
Okay.
especially if it's undiluted, because the acidity can be really harsh on your throat and your stomach.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the best approach is to dilute it
Okay.
with water or juice.
Mm-hmm.
A tablespoon or two in a glass of liquid is a good place to start.
Okay. And is it best to take it like on an empty stomach or with meals, or does it matter?
There's no like hard and fast rule,
Okay.
but some people find that taking it with a meal helps to reduce any potential digestive discomfort.
Okay.
And if you're taking it for blood sugar control, consuming it with a meal might be more beneficial.
That makes sense. What about incorporating it into food? I've heard of people adding it to like salad dressings and marinades.
Absolutely.
Could that work?
Yeah, it adds this like tangy complexity to dishes.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good in salad dressings, marinades, even sauces.
Uh-huh.
You can find tons of recipes online. But even just a simple drivel over a salad can like add a nice little flavor boost.
Okay, so it's like a good way to get your daily dose of apple cider vinegar
Yeah.
without having to like force down a
Well,
diluted shot.
Mm-hmm.
But even with culinary uses, moderation is key.
Yeah, too much can overpower the other flavors in your dish.
Right, good point.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, the science, the risks, the practical tips.
Mm-hmm.
What's like the biggest takeaway you want listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to approach apple cider vinegar with a balanced perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a miracle cure,
Right.
but it might have some potential health benefits.
Yeah.
So do your research, be critical of the information that you encounter,
Mm.
and consult with your doctor if you have any concerns.
Well said. And speaking of research, I'm kind of curious. What are some of the areas that you think warrant further investigation when it comes to apple cider vinegar? Like, what are the unanswered questions that researchers are still grappling with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, one area that I find particularly fascinating is the potential impact of apple cider vinegar on the gut microbiome.
Oh, the gut microbiome. That's such a hot topic these days.
It really is, and for good reason. We're learning more and more about just how crucial the gut is for overall health.
Right. Like, it's not just about digestion anymore.
Exactly. There's growing evidence that the composition of our gut bacteria can influence everything from our immune system to our mental health.
Wow. It's like a whole ecosystem in there.
It really is. And some researchers believe that apple cider vinegar, with its postbiotic content, might have prebiotic-like effects.
Okay. So remind me what prebiotics are again.
So prebiotics are basically types of fiber that we can't digest, but they act as food for the beneficial bacteria in our gut.
Okay. So it's like fertilizer for our good gut bugs.
Exactly. And the idea is that by nourishing those good bacteria, we can help to create a more balanced and healthy gut microbiome.
That makes sense. So you're saying apple cider vinegar might be able to do that too.
Well, that's what some researchers are investigating. The thought is that the postbiotics in apple cider vinegar could selectively nourish those beneficial bacteria.
So it's not about adding probiotics directly, but more about helping the good bacteria that are already there to thrive.
Exactly. It's a really interesting area of research, but it's still early days.
It's amazing to think that something as simple as apple cider vinegar could have such a profound impact on our gut health.
I know, it's pretty incredible, and it just highlights how much we still have to learn about the complex interactions between food and our bodies.
I'm also curious about the long-term effects of apple cider vinegar consumption. Most of the studies we've discussed have looked at short-term outcomes, but do we know anything about what happens when people incorporate apple cider vinegar into their diet for months or even years?
That's a great question, and unfortunately one that we don't have definitive answers to yet. We need more long-term studies to really assess the safety and efficacy of regular apple cider vinegar consumption over extended periods.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a potential health benefit, but it's important to remember that there's always more to the story.
Absolutely, and it's possible that there are cumulative effects, both positive and negative, that we haven't fully uncovered yet.
It's a good reminder that even with natural substances, it's important to proceed with a bit of caution and not assume that more is always better.
I completely agree. And this ties back to something we talked about earlier, the importance of being critical consumers of health information.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially these days with so much information coming at us from all directions.
Exactly. We're bombarded with messages about the latest superfoods and miracle cures, and it can be so hard to sift through it all and figure out what's actually true.
Especially in the age of social media where everybody's an expert and anecdotal evidence spreads like wildfire.
It's more important than ever to develop those critical thinking skills.
Totally. So, what are some tips for navigating this overwhelming world of health information?
Well, first and foremost, question your sources. Don't just take everything you read or hear at face value.
Okay, so like who's behind the information and what are their credentials?
Exactly. Look for evidence-based research, not just personal anecdotes or testimonials.
Right, because just because something worked for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone.
Exactly. And be wary of claims that sound too good to be true. If it seems like a miracle cure, it probably is.
Yeah, those red flags are important to watch out for.
Absolutely. And remember, your health is your responsibility.
That's a good point.
Don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and advocate for your own well-being.
I love that. It's so empowering to remember that we have the right to be informed and make decisions that are best for our own bodies.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And when it comes to our health, it's more important than ever.
Yeah, there are a lot of really interesting areas ripe for more research with apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, like what are you kind of most excited to see?
I think one that's really cool is looking more at the long-term effects of taking apple cider vinegar.
Oh, okay. So like beyond those initial studies. Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of the stuff that's out there now is, shorter term.
Right.
So it'd be really interesting to see like what happens if people take it every day for, months or even years.
Yeah, are there benefits that like build up over time or
Exactly. Or are there, potential downsides that we haven't seen yet?
right, because like anything, even natural stuff
Right.
can have, negative effects if you take too much of it or for too long.
Absolutely. And that's something that we really need more research on.
For sure. Well, it sounds like there's still a lot to learn about apple cider vinegar.
Oh, definitely. We've only just scratched the surface.
It's a good reminder that, even with something that seems so simple and familiar, there's always more to discover.
Exactly.
And it's exciting to think about what future research might reveal.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into apple cider vinegar.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this tangy journey.
Yeah. And remember, be curious, be informed, and as always, stay well.